I have Michelle Melendez. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied today. She's the Vice President of Aon. I have Tony D'Angelo, who's the VP Chief Information Security Officer in Cova Insurance. Holly Drake, who's the Chief Information Security Officer of the state of Ohio. And Brian Wallitz, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer of Cardinal Health. Super excited to have them all here today. They're going to be speaking on open discussion on current trends and what you think will be the most critical initiatives for cyber in the next 18 months and forward-looking strategies. We are going to make this an open forum. So once again, it's very important for my virtual guests. If you have any questions, just put your put your question in the chat, and my back-end team will make sure that your questions are answered. And everyone that is in here, when you raise your hand, please wait for my tech team to bring the mic so we can get you mic'd so everyone can hear you. For the people standing in the back, there are so many chairs. I mean, you should not have to stand up. Once I get done, I'll kind of escort you to chairs if you can't find any. But with that being said, let's welcome our panelists.
So as Kim said, we would like to make this interactive. I think sometimes when you're on a panel, when you're just talking to people, it's not as fun. So I may pick on a few people if you don't answer questions. So the first question I'm going to actually ask all of you, because I think we all represent different industries, so some things may slightly be different, but some things will probably be the same. So when we look at emerging technologies, what trends do you think are shaping our industry in the next 18 months, and how are organizations preparing to integrate these advancements? Brian, do you want to go ahead and start?
Is this thing on? Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you starting with me, and I appreciate the lunchtime time slot here. It's always fantastic. In all seriousness, has anybody heard of AI in this room? Yeah, I would say that is definitely at the top of the list as far as emerging technologies. I think being in healthcare, there's certainly a lot of different applications for that. For us, a lot of what we're focused on right now is more internally focused type things in terms of how do we drive more efficiencies across our organization, whether that's in customer service, IT, right? Helping with code development and those types of things, just trying to make ourselves more efficient. Also looking at how do we support our business and our customers to, I guess, get more predictive in terms of inventory allocation. How do we make sure we have good visibility in terms of when that inventory is going to be on hand to fill customer orders? So a lot of different use cases that we've identified at this point in time. I think in terms of things we need to think about to secure and integrate that technology, I think a lot of that starts with policy, right? Making sure you've got a policy that not only talks about how you're going to do this in a secure fashion, but a responsible fashion as well, right? Making sure we've got the right controls in place over that types of technology, both in terms of how we limit access, how do we make sure that the output from those particular models, we have confidence in it, right? And that's how we establish trust with our internal users, but also with our consumers on the back end of it too. So I would say that's one trend. Automation certainly is another thing. Being in manufacturing and distribution, there's a lot of automation we're trying to put into those particular facilities as well to help drive efficiencies and making sure that we've got the right approach in terms of all of our good cyber controls around segmentation, limiting access, and all of those kinds of things are really at the forefront for us.
I feel like you started a trend, Brian, that's going to happen. Yeah. It's going to be AI, I think, probably all down the table. Yeah. Oh, all right. Holly, she'll round us out. AI for us as well, both internally and externally, is a big emerging trend. With Aon, we're in the business of advising a lot of other businesses on smart decisions. And so that means we collect a lot of data and we analyze a lot of data to be able to do that predictive analysis, what's going on in like the healthcare industry, what's going on in the cyber insurance industry, and then we advise our clients on how to make good decisions. I think policy is definitely something very important, but so is a good data management program and education. Like I think education I would probably put very close to the top. People handling all of this data, they need to know how to care for that data, and that's not necessarily the top of their list. And so I would encourage you to make it somewhat fun and interactive to help them remember the things that we want them to do. So when you come around to check on them, they're doing those things.
So the AI train continues. I would agree with all the comments from both Brian and Michelle. We're, coming from insurance, we're in the same boat. We've got a lot of data. We've got a lot of workflow automation that we're looking at. And I think, the only thing I would add is, policy is important, data management's important, data governance. And I think, with that, you got to create a structure within your organizations that help you manage that. So, like we've created an AI working group where we've got a cross-functional team, both business leaders, risk, legal, security, all coming together, talking through those use cases, because they can get very complicated very quick, and they can also get very expensive very quick. So you've got to really try to strike the right balance, as you're looking at efficiency and effectiveness. And automation is another large part of that.
I figured everyone would say AI, so I decided to pick a different trend. So my name is Holly Drake. I'm the state CISO. The National Association of CIOs has picked cybersecurity as the #1 emerging trend, which is good for our CISOs across the states. And I thought I'd share a little bit about what Ohio is doing when it comes to really improving our cybersecurity posture. We have a really exciting program. I'm not going to talk about the policy now. I decided to change my mind. That's question 4. We have something called the Ohio Digital Academy, which is a way that we bring in new cybersecurity professionals into our profession. I think we have lots of conversations about workforce. You can't find them, you can't hire them, you can't keep them. This innovative program recruits graduates or career changers. So if you're a Starbucks barista and you want to become a cybersecurity professional, this program is for you. We'll give you training, we'll give you certifications, and then you get to work with my team for a 3-year commitment to learn from the smartest cybersecurity team in the state of Ohio. And with that, hopefully after your 3 years, you get paid, you get full benefits, then you go to, I see so many of my colleagues here, you go to Nationwide and you have a well-trained cyber pro ready to sort of engage in that organization as an exciting one. Around whole of state, there is a whole of state cybersecurity strategy for the first time. This is really working on how do state agencies maintain security. That's my job. But there's another piece of the work around local government entities, and I know that some of you are in the room. There are grants available to boost your cybersecurity practices as well. There is a training program that goes along with that that's for free to help you learn how to create incident response reports, practice tabletop exercises, and then actually you can even use the range, the Ohio Cyber Range, to practice defending your environment in the range. And so there's a lot of free things available to local government entities. And I think the last thing I would pitch that we're doing that's an emerging trend is really increasing the number of Ohio Cyber Reservists. So if you are not a member of the Ohio Cyber Reserve, visit the website and sign up. We have about 200 members now, and they're trying to grow that community. These are cybersecurity professionals that are called. So when unfortunate things happen in Cleveland, the Cyber Reserve was called to go assist in that mission. So those are some of the emerging trends that we're seeing in the state of Ohio.
So obviously we have to do a plug since, what is this month? I was going to say, I hope everyone knows that in here. So I think about, from an AI perspective, I do think the training is super important. I feel bad, honestly, for security awareness teams because some of the deep fake and the AI stuff is getting so good. It's really sometimes challenging to figure out what's real, what's not real. And with all of this, I think identity access management's always been important, but I think the only way that we're gonna even be able to wrap many controls around this is that, and knowing who both people are on both sides. So I just wanted to add that because I think the training and development is part of that, but it's definitely really important because, you know, AI has been around forever. It's the generative AI that's hit the world by perfect storm, and I think a lot of people just think you can put whatever you want in it and don't understand the consequences behind that. And so we can't be mad at end users that do that because they're leveraging. By show of hands, how many people use ChatGPT or any of that stuff? I use it every single day. It's made me so much more productive. It's not my only resource, but it helps me organize. And for companies, I know there's been a few companies that said, we're not gonna work with vendors that are using AI. You're gonna have no vendors to work with. So that's why we have to figure this out because everyone's gonna leverage it for good, bad, and indifferent. So I just wanted to add that to it. All right, so the fun one, we just realized that the ports may be closing, and so people are buying all the toilet paper, so it's like COVID-2, I think. So how do you think the current economic environment, inflation, interest rates, global supply chain, political landscapes and things like that, and not to get political, but obviously we all know elections coming up, so things can change depending on how that ends. So Holly, I'll go ahead and start with you. I won't always pick on the same person first time.
I think it's an interesting question. I mean, we're all cybersecurity professionals at a certain level. A certain part of my role is to buy tools to secure an environment and then hire and inspire a team to deliver on the promises of those tools. So budgets are definitely something we're looking really closely at, or what in our tool sets. What you're starting to see is a lot of vendors offer the similar tool sets. So do you really need 2 tools? Can you start consolidating to save on budgets? What I actually spend a little more time thinking about, my number one goal is really around team, and team and culture is really important to me at the state of Ohio. And when I think about economic pressures, I think about how that affects my staff. And so then I get other things I need to be thinking about as a leader. Maybe they find they need to make more money, and so they might want to leave and go work for one of you. And then I have to figure out a backfill strategy. Maybe they're stressed, right? Cybersecurity professionals buy alcohol and other medication for a reason. So it's already like a stressful job, and then to add economic stress on top of that, I think affects their mental health. And so what do I need to do in my team and culture to have downtime or relax or talk about it to make it a little bit easier? And then, as a leader, like, what does it mean if I need to switch tools because of economics, and then I don't have anybody that is trained to use that new tool? And so there's just a lot of different pieces for me about economics, but the main one I'm thinking about is team.
I think coming from our space, I would agree. A lot of it comes back to team, right? So in insurance, as the economic pressures rise, right, it affects our investment portfolio, our claims, premiums go up. But a lot of that is, how do you manage the team as they're feeling that economic stress? Because you've got people that, like Holly said, it's already a difficult job. We're all under a lot of pressure. And then you add that home pressure from the economic perspective, and trying to keep the morale of your team and trying to keep people motivated while they're dealing with stuff that's affecting their personal life is very difficult. So, I mean, we've done stuff, going back through COVID, even recently, trying to do virtual happy hours, bring the team together. We haven't talked about work from home, but trying to balance work from home and be flexible and all those things that come into play. It's really, at the end of the day, it gets back to, how do you manage your culture? How do you manage that morale? And how do you get people to understand that they are important? It's not just, claims are up 10%. It's, we do care about how they feel, how they're performing, and how they're reacting, and trying to do stuff to improve that morale situation.
So we see it both on the business side and on the team side. One, just in the insurance industry, everything's more expensive. So as we start to advise customers again on like medical care, healthcare, the average cost per employee has gone up for pretty significantly for the first time in a long time, right? And that's because it's becoming very expensive for the staff at the doctor's office and the hospitals, et cetera. So costs are going up overall, not just on claims, but on benefits. So then when that translates to the teams, I think that we're all seeing it right now. There's cuts happening all across the country, all around the world, right? Because costs are going up. And I think that while the teams have a lot of stress on their jobs, I think that there's a lot of fear in the staff right now too, because they're hearing about people being cut in this industry, which traditionally hasn't happened, and being cut at large numbers. And so I think that giving your teams grace, right? My team's 100% remote, and so I'm not one of those leaders that watches for the green or red light on their teams, right? I trust them and I expect that they're going to get their jobs done, but give them the grace during the day. Childcare is hard right now. Food is hard right now, right? And I think some of us that have been in it a long time, I've been in here 30 years, my son will be 25 in December. It's hard for me to remember some of those times, and we have to, as leaders, remember those times and give our teams grace to build their families and do their job.
I feel like I'm at the end of the AI train here. I don't know how much more else I could add to the conversation here, but I mean, clearly being in manufacturing and distribution, inflation impacts our business pretty significantly, right? The cost of raw materials going up, cost of transportation, which drives everything up, puts a lot of pressure on the business, right? And so we're trying to manage costs as best we can. I think the one thing I kind of would offer up is we talked about AI before. I know there's a lot of concern from folks on, is this going to replace jobs out there? I would argue that this is a great opportunity to figure out how do we leverage those technologies to do our jobs more efficiently and effectively and help our folks, right, who may be struggling and trying to balance all the work on their plates. So just something to think about.
So, of course, they're all answering more questions that we're supposed to do, so I'll add. Yeah, and obviously, if anytime anyone has a question, just raise your hand. So, Brian, you did talk a little bit about this, so I'll start with Michelle on this one. We do hear a lot where AI and automation are going to take away people's jobs. I personally think that if we use it and leverage it right, we can all focus on what's important. So are anybody in the audience or any of you SOC analysts? So God bless you, because I know I would rather poke my eyes out than look at logs all day. But I mean, it's so much pressure on you to find the needle in the haystack. And so I think, and I'll let everyone comment on it, but I do think if we use it right, then I think if you could get through all of the logs and be able to focus on what's really important to organizations, I think that's going to make all of us better. So Michelle, I'll go ahead and have you start with that.
Yeah, I think this is another fear topic. Internally, whenever we started talking to people just about automation or AI to leverage our processes, the immediate answer from folks both within technology and the business was like, nope, not going to work. We're not doing that. And so it is, again, like an education path, right? At the same time, they all say no. They all say, I need like 40 more people to do my job, right? And so helping them understand that it's not going to completely replace their jobs, but it's going to enhance their jobs. And when we need to go look for 40 people that aren't there, they're going to struggle. They're going to stress. And so just helping them understand that like leveraging these technologies to augment their job to do like more with less isn't always a bad thing, because those 40 people aren't coming. It's not always about budget. It's about there's no availability, right? And so if we don't start embracing it, they're going to be more stressed than they are right now.
Again, I'd agree, but we keep talking about these things, and I think there's a lot of commonality, even though we're very different industries up here. Our culture has always been we're a smaller team. We wear lots of hats. And then you look at AI, and there is that fear factor that it's going to start eliminating positions or reducing staff. And I think our perspective is we look at it as enhancing the staff, right? You gotta kind of alleviate that fear and get people to understand that we can use AI to be more efficient and effective, and that should take that low-hanging fruit that the busy work kind of thing out of the aspect of some of these jobs and elevate people to be able to spend time on more higher value activities. And so that's really what we're trying to kind of communicate to our staff right now, is trying to alleviate that fear of, we're going to lay off people or there's going to be a reduction in force or something. That's not our culture. We'd rather enhance those roles and then get, kind of repurpose some of those roles into higher value activities. And, and when you look specifically at security, right, whether it's SOC analysts looking for the needle in the haystack or risk evaluations or, we could always use more help at those higher value, bigger picture issues, and especially when you're trying to relate that to business leaders, right? So if you can alleviate some of that process and you can start having conversations with people because now you have more time, that really will help elevate the security program overall.
This is my AI response. We have a statewide AI policy, which I think really has helped get started. I think the biggest hurdle of AI is the starting part. And so the guidelines or the policy just provides the guardrails for getting started. And then there's a council. Agencies will proffer or bring forward a proposal for a POC. They go through the POC, they measure it, they determine if it's effective, and then it gets approval to move into sort of production state. And I think having the guardrails just helps them wade through the fear, because otherwise every meeting is like, what if it doesn't work? You just have to start. And there's enough technology out there, there's enough sandboxing out there to get it started. And then measure. So some of our agencies are actually pretty adoptive of AI technology and have measured, coders that are, how much more efficiency are they gaining by using AI, measurable. And I think that helps reinforce that it's just making you do your job better when you actually try it and do it. And then I think from a security perspective, the policy does require a privacy and a security review, which has been an intellectually interesting journey, because it's just really, for all the reasons you're thinking of why it's hard to do a privacy and security assessment, it is. But I challenge my team, start thinking about what we need to think about from a security perspective and get better and keep practicing it. And I think even after a few months of this, I'm already seeing the benefit. We're also training our team. So there are members of my team that have put forward POCs for AI so that we're using it for a cybersecurity benefit, but they're also learning how this technology works. And if you learn how it works, you can help assess it better. So I think my advice is just start.
Well, what I think about too is, like, some of us are old enough. I remember I got my first computer in 1987 when I graduated to go to college, and it was like $4,000. The modem was 1400 speed. And if you think about back then, very few people had home computers. Very few people actually had access to a computer. To me, all of this technology is the same. We have to be able to build guardrails in it, because if you remember, everyone was like, computers are going to take over the world, none of us have jobs, and look how much the job market from computers. And so our jobs will be there, but I always talk about security should be a journey, not a destination. So I challenge all of you, if you're so comfortable in never learning, then you will work yourself out of a job, because technology is always going to move rapidly and fast. And so when you leverage the technology, it actually will make you better. And I think that's what you have to remember, is that when you look at the evolution of technology, we've heard this many times with jobs being taken away. I mean, even in manufacturing, I feel like some, like the late 80s and 90s, we talked about no one would have factory jobs. Has it changed? It totally has changed, but there are still people that work in factories. So I think if you're scared about it, or you know people, I think that's a really good example to share with people so that it's not so overwhelming. Do you guys agree with that?
I absolutely agree with you on that. That was kind of the point I was going to make too, is you have to help folks get over that fear factor on some of this stuff too. I think like a good example would be automation in a warehouse, right? Or in a manufacturing facility. I think folks worried about that replacing their jobs, but now I think they've seen the benefits from a health and a safety perspective that they understand how it helps supplement them. Before, you would have had somebody pushing a cart around a warehouse that weighed 500 pounds. Now they've got robots going up and down the aisles carrying those totes. They're packing it in there, and they're able to be more productive at their job because of that, as well as reducing injuries and workers' comp claims and things like that. So those benefits are out there. You kind of have to think about AI the same way in terms of understanding how can this help supplement my role, right? I don't think you're going to see a bunch of jobs getting replaced right out of the gate here. It probably happens slowly over a period of time, but I think that gives folks the opportunity to retool and reskill themselves to find those jobs that we probably don't even know exist at this point, right? Things that will emerge with new technology and things like that. So.
So I'll start with you, Tony, because I don't think I picked on you first yet. So I don't want to pick on CrowdStrike, but I feel like everyone has heard that, including like all these people on TikTok that are saying completely wrong information. But I do think the one thing that came out of that is I think companies are really considering what is their resiliency plan, what is their disaster recovery business continuity. I actually got stuck in San Diego. My husband had to drive to Atlanta to get me because I couldn't get home until 4 days later. No rental cars, no hotels in a 60-mile radius. So it was a really long weekend. But you think about, and I know like Delta is getting a little bit of pressure because they were the last one that were brought up. And to me, the fact that they could not bring up their ticketing system and their staff. They weren't sure where their staff was, so pilots were timing out. And so that was one of the biggest reasons of getting that. And to me, like, someone that big, why didn't they have a backup plan? So I think this opportunity for all of us, because I don't care if you're in security or not, and obviously it wasn't a security incident, I don't know of one person that didn't hear about the CrowdStrike thing. So I think we can leverage that to have a real business case. I mean, I think, wasn't Delta like $400 million that they lost or something crazy? So to executives, numbers mean something, especially if you can correlate it to something that's real. So just kind of talking about, an incident like CrowdStrike or other security incidents, obviously not CrowdStrike as a security, like what do we need to do as leaders to think about what does that resiliency look like?
So I think it really starts with having that conversation with the executives, right? One of the best things that came out of CrowdStrike was it forced those conversations. Everybody got that awareness very quickly. So it was in everybody's face. Everybody was, like you said, you felt the effects of not being able to travel. We had similar issues where we're not a CrowdStrike customer, but we were impacted downstream because some of our vendors obviously were. So it really started that resiliency question at our executive level, and we had several conversations where we were able to articulate what we are doing as an organization, how we have been trying to respond to this. We have risk management. We've got some other areas that have been trying to really strengthen our DR and our business continuity positioning, because like many of you, we've been shifting away from our own data center more and more into the cloud. We're a very hybrid company, and that gets very difficult very quick from a DR perspective. And if you don't have tabletops, if you don't have those conversations with executives, if you don't start pointing out the risks, you can get easily caught in a CrowdStrike type of event where something very important goes down. And for us, we're an independent agent based insurance company, so we don't have captured agents. The agents are all independent. They're selling on our behalf. If our portals were to go down, it would be a CrowdStrike event for us. And so, we were able to kind of make that transition, articulate those things with our executives, and make sure that they were thinking about it in those terms. It's not just what does it cost to move it to the cloud, or how much is the licensing for running the portal, but now it's how do we make sure that it doesn't ever go down? What is the backup plan? What is a business continuity strategy around these things that are very important to the business? So I think that's really the key of it, is having those conversations.
And I'm going to add so that you guys have maybe a little bit more to talk about. Are any of you looking at your vendor, like your SLAs, your end user licenses, and those things of when you partner with outside companies? or is that something that you're seeing changes? Because I've heard a lot of people are starting to look at, maybe like going through those contracts a little finer, just because, I don't think the CrowdStrike thing is the last time we're going to see something like this.
No.
So how do we bounce back, and can we ensure that we have better communications between our third-party vendors and our partners in security?
Real quick, for us, it really elevated that third-party risk management practice, right? Going back, look at the maturity on that. Are we keeping pace? Are we evaluating this? And everything loops back to AI, but we're actually evaluating a process where we've got an AI engine looking at our contract language and making sure that all our contracts are covered from our MSA perspective and rank ordering them in risk, from a risk perspective.
We're looking at our suppliers as well, but really trying to focus on the critical path suppliers that support the business critical processes. I think another thing that we've spent some time doing is inventorying other tools that we might have that have access that low in the operating system, and figuring out, like, what are we doing with this, and, like, what is our plan? I think we're going to do probably a more staggered patching system, so that we're not hitting all of the systems all at once. So I think that was a lesson learned when we allow automatic updates. I think that just pragmatically, when you have a dependency on a third-party supplier, having a backup plan is a must. It's not an option, right? Because they may go out of business. It might not even be a tech thing. From a security practitioner perspective, I would say that I spent a couple of years in a tech organization and learned a lot of things. And one of the things I learned is that security teams don't always do UAT testing very well or regression testing very well. And that was the first thing I thought about during the CrowdStrike incident, is what happened to the testing before they deployed that, right? And so I would encourage you to go back and look at your processes internally. And even if you're not running the system and you're dependent on the system, start asking challenging questions to the people that run those systems that you're dependent on of how they're doing their testing before they do updates. And the last I'll say is, hooray for all the DR people. You're finally in the front and center.
Great point. No, I think you kind of make a great point about the test aspect of it too, and looking at our own internal processes. I think you talked about third-party risk. I think just making sure that those questions get asked during that evaluation as well. SLAs are important, but I mean, you think about this CrowdStrike one, they identified the issue very quickly. So in theory, their service was back up and running. There was no service level violation, but obviously it had a pretty big impact across a lot of companies. So you need to think, I think, a little bit more comprehensively around how you structure some of those aspects of your contract there. I agree with Tony's point as well about just making sure you are engaged with the business and understanding what are their most critical business processes. What are the systems that support it? But I think more importantly, like, what is their risk tolerance around some of this stuff too? How long can those things be down so that you're maybe not over baking your resiliency plan, and in some cases you may be under baking that, right? So you've got to manage that risk appropriately. You've got to have well-documented plans, and you have to test them out to make sure that they're going to work in those types of scenarios. I kind of think back to a quote that Urban Meyer had. It's you don't rise to the occasion, you rise to the level of your training, right? So I think practicing those things is an extremely important part of your resiliency strategy.
I think it's not just, I agree with, it's not just CrowdStrike, it's just any business interruption. And we're doing a lot more on continuity. We had a couple, if you think about Change Healthcare, everybody getting notices, different. And then there are things that we can't deliver that are unanticipated. So when a city is affected by an attack, or a county, we have state offices in those counties, and citizens may access state resources through something in the city or the county. And so they're not part of my third-party risk strategy per se, but if you can't report a birth because the system won't take uploads from the city, then you can't do all the things you need to do as a new parent. Or if someone passes away, you can't start all the processes you need to start because they're not in the record, right? And so we're doing a lot more work around understanding, okay, if that goes down, how long can it be down? And then, do we start using fax machines? The thing that's also tricky is that digital government is the #2 priority for CIOs. And so taking all of these processes that are going to the DMV and moving them into going online is a big drive for the state of Ohio. And so you're putting all of your energy in online, and then you can't use the online, and that's the balance we're trying to face. We're trying to work through.
Okay, we have one last question, and then please, if you have questions, interrupt us, it's fine. So I know I've had conversations with several people today. So remote work versus hybrid models. What are the evolving trends in remote and hybrid work environments, and how can organizations adapt to maintain productivity and innovation?
Hybrid. So at my team, so we are 2 days in the office, 3 days work from home. We also have flexible, for the most part, pretty flexible schedules, generous paid time off. I have a lot of employees that if you have a lot of years, you have a lot of vacation, so I'm always pushing them to take their paid time off. I don't have a silver bullet for this. I'm not a leader that loves a 100% remote. I know that other leaders think that people get just as much done. My experience is that cybersecurity professionals are generally introverted, generally less likely to engage with others unless you're sort of in those moments. I think it's hard to replicate creativity in hybrid. So I haven't found a good way of the meeting after the meeting where someone throws out an idea, because cyber is a profession of brainstorming, right? It is not a profession of like doing the same thing 15 times always. And I don't know how to recreate that. Come into the whiteboard and let's write this down, and then how would we do this, and then how would you solve this, and what's the risk? That I've been struggling. How do you recreate that with the team? So I do like 2 days in. Everybody comes in on Tuesdays, and so then we have the full team together and tend to do a little more work. On that day, I actually ask for very few meetings. So I don't want the Tuesday day to be, I'm in person, we should have all of our stand-ups in person. That should be a day for drive-bys and creativity and hallway conversations. And that's something we're trying, but I'll be curious what you guys are doing.
I think we're struggling as well, and it's trying to find that right balance, right? So our stance is we're hybrid, but that really turned into 90-95% work from home, and we have very few people showing up on a regular basis. We don't have a mandate for any time in the office from an IT perspective, so everybody's using their best judgment, and which means a couple days a week we have a lot of leaders showing up for meetings. We don't have any of the staff, and so the other thing we struggle with is we own our building. We've owned it since the 70s, so we've got to justify that property, and so there's that internal struggle, not just with how do you get people to interact, and how do you get introverted people to be involved, but now you've got the business challenge of we've got whatever the number, 800 employees here in Columbus. Less than 50 people show up in our building on a regular basis. So, you still have to pay the utilities, you still have to run the cafeteria, you still have to do all those things, just to what it takes to run the building. And then so you constantly get into these justification conversations of, should we bring people back just to help justify the cost of the building? And we don't want to. We're trying to take the stance of we are very committed to hybrid, which it means a lot of different things to people right now. But I think like Holly was saying, it's how do you make those events in the building meaningful, right? We've done IT town halls where we ask everybody to come in. We've done all company events where we've asked people to come in. We've done different meetings and leadership summits and those kinds of things just to try to get people in a room face to face, because you do lose all those kind of water cooler conversations with people just trying to be on Teams or Slack or whatever your collaboration platform is. And I think that's the other side of that is you also have don't be out of sight, out of mind, because a lot of people are at home, they're not on camera, they're doing their thing, they might be doing their job very well, but nobody really sees you anymore. Nobody sees you walking around the office. Nobody can stop by your desk. You don't have that presence in a meeting And, you know, you can be forgotten about depending on how many people you're talking about or the size of your team or what your role is. And I think that's something we're struggling with is, because not only am I the CISO, but I'm over our end user compute. So I have our collaboration team reporting to me. And we've really been trying to push, you know, get people on camera, try to find ways to engage even when you are remote. Because it makes a big difference when people can see you, they see your reaction. You know, you might have a better interaction, people might follow up with you, than you're just a voice on a phone, or in some cases, you're just a picture on a video call. And, you know, maybe you don't say anything, maybe you know, you're just some picture in the corner, and people aren't engaging. So I think it's a struggle. We haven't found the silver bullet yet. But I think it's going to continue to evolve, especially as we see more and more companies make announcements that they're bringing people back.
So I agree with both of you. Holly, I miss the water cooler conversations. I started this. They build trust. They do. They build trust, relationships. You know who you can call and count on. I started this job working from home, which was a totally different dynamic. I have teams all around the world, Dublin, London, Krakow, Poland, Australia, India, and all across the United States. So it's very difficult for me to even see all of my teams. I do try to travel when I can to see them. I encourage the folks that are in locations close to each other to get together more socially instead of asking them to go in and do work, right? Setting aside some budget funds for them to go do something after work together that's fun and a little bit lighter than asking them to go in and where a lot of people feel like I'm going in and I'm sitting on Teams meetings all day, right? I think the other thing is, to your point, Tony, about losing visibility. You know, I think it's important as leaders that you're holding skip levels with those folks further in the organization so they do feel seen. It's very easy when you're kind of, again, at that lower level of an organization to feel like nobody even cares if you're online or not. And I'm going to do my laundry because nobody's going to ask me a question in this meeting, right? And so if you get in there and you just start doing random skip levels with them and let them know that you know what they're doing and you appreciate the work that they're doing, I find that they become more engaging in meetings and the cameras start coming on because they start to feel a relationship and a connection with their leaders as well. So if you have folks that are working remote, don't let them hide, right? Don't pressure them to turn on the cameras, but make sure that you see them and they know that you see them.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a ton more to add there. We've been fully remote since the start of the pandemic, and I would agree. Like the toughest part is really just how do you create a culture when everybody's on video calls all day long. I mean, there's only so many things you can do via Teams, right? Or we have teams that create kind of cube time where it's just open forum, right? Like connect on a more personal level as opposed to talking shop and about all the different things that you're working on. We do have, you know, like Teams channels where folks are communicating as far as like, you know, progress on projects and just sharing information, but you still kind of tend to be in your silo of your own team. So it is a difficult nut to crack for sure, but I agree, right? Doing those skip levels and making sure you're engaged at all levels of the organization certainly helps. I think one, the visibility is great for those folks, but I think as well, they understand like what is the vision, where are we headed, and they can connect their work to, you know, to the overall mission of the team and of the company, quite frankly. So those are all important things, you know, to do in that respect. But I would say like nothing can replicate those in-person meetings, right? I think just the value you get in terms of the trust, how quickly you can build it, working through problems, building strategy, those are important, you know, moments that matter for teams.
I also think there, you know, during the beginning of COVID, I actually did like virtual happy hours. And what, honestly, the most people that came to, though, were single people that didn't live with anyone. So I think also when you work with other people, knowing that they may not have family or friends, just doing check-ins and making sure that they're okay too, because, I mean, the world is heavy many times, and so I think it's just having that human compassion is super important. So we only have, I think, about 15 minutes left, so we want to open up for questions. Everybody's raising their hands. I think there's some microphones somewhere. Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. My question is there privacy anymore? I've got a personal persona, I have my memberships, and I have my work. And those, if you think about the vast network and integration of systems, those are combined somewhere. So how can I ensure as a individual that my data is okay, hasn't gotten out, or does tie in to my business, right? And all of you, you're out on the internet everywhere, so your personal information is there. Is there privacy anymore?
We'll let Holly do that. She's a privacy person.
I am, and also Angie's on my team, so it feels only fair that I start the conversation. I think it depends on what you mean by privacy. So if you mean I have immediate and direct control over every aspect of my personal information, that is not the reality of 2024. If you mean in general, are companies using personal information responsibly? Yes. I think that you do see website privacy statements that talk about how this data is used. Privacy has become a very rigorous and defined practice in most major companies. And I think you see enforcement of privacy activities on a pretty regular basis. And above that, when I was Chief Privacy Officer at Ohio State, there's also the value of privacy, meaning like people care about privacy. And as a person, like they personally care about privacy. And so I think companies know that, and they make decisions based on that. And then if you want your data to be used for marketing purposes or to get Facebook for free, you've signed up for that.
I'll chime in here. So I think if you don't work in a global organization, you might not have insights into just how data is treated so differently around the world. And America, frankly, lags far behind a lot of other countries when we talk about managing our data. And I think that, frankly, that's on all of us, right? It's on the consumers, because I was in a meeting one time with a CEO of an e-commerce company. We were talking about data. And I asked him, why don't you want to do something about this data? And he said, well, people are still buying stuff, right? You're buying it. You're not demanding it as consumers. And so the dollar speaks, right? I don't know that we'll ever see, maybe sometime, like national regulations around privacy. I don't know that we'll ever see it. I think we'll see it in pockets. But I think as we, as like consumers and citizens of the country, start to ask more for it, you'll start to see it. I think the companies that are a bit more mature in it are the more global companies, where they have to comply with regulations around the world. And so America gets it as a byproduct, right? But I would encourage you that, like, make your voices heard. Make your voices heard to your, politicians, to your leaders in your company. Data does matter to you, because I'll tell you what, when I have the conversations in the UK and Germany about data, it's a much different experience than it is here.
I have a question from online, and we'll get to some people back in the room. This is from Shaista Naeem. We may use Cyber, ChatGPT, AI to streamline our tasks, but how can we be sure that the output is correct and hasn't been hacked with?
You really can't yet, right? It all depends on what the solution is, and it's really on how you architect that, how you set it up, what you're using. AI is very complicated, so it's hard to give a generic answer to something like that. I think it's all going to come into how do organizations, what level of rigor do you put into building that AI to make sure that it is resilient and that your data is clean.
I think the other piece of that too, I think there's the testing of those models too. The other piece of that is probably more the human in the loop in those particular processes too, especially where you've got models that are where the output is potentially impacting patient safety, or if it's high brand and reputational impact to your organization. You're going to want to have folks in the middle of those to verify that output, make sure it's legitimate and is achieving its objectives.
Next question.
Oh, yeah, my question, and this has been something that we've struggled with at Ohio State with cloud applications, but now AI, is what are your recommendations for educating the end users? Because a lot of them get very excited about these new technologies, but they don't think about the fact that, like specifically with us with research projects, they don't think about the fact that this data that they're inputting could be into something that could expose it to the world.
I mean, one thing we're thinking about are our sandboxes and using the Microsoft tenant, for example, to sort of control that. And I think it's just education. It came up earlier that that's like the number one thing. And then for me, it depends on the use case, which kind of ties back to the previous question. If you use ChatGPT to ask, like, what panel question should I ask a group of CISOs, it doesn't matter if the answer is imprecise, right? I mean, we don't need
an example, right?
Right, completely abstract. But, like, who cares if it's not nuanced? If you're using it to understand, like, interpreting law, you're not going to get a precise answer. And so I think understanding that you have to take a little bit of a human approach to what you're getting back.
I think the other piece of it too, and Michelle, you kind of touched on it before, is just the education, right? The training and education. I think we're doing a lot of that more on the side of, hey, what are the potential use cases for the technology? But I think you also need to educate end users on the damage, right, that it could cause, or you know, the types of questions that you should be asking it and the implications of those kinds of things too. So a lot of it is going to depend on, are you using public models or using internal models as well in terms of how that data is shared. But the training and education, I think, is an important part of any program.
I think it goes hand in hand with data management education as well, right? Because you can teach them about AI and how you can have public and private, models. But really, if they don't understand how to handle their data, they might not understand what that really means when you're like, oh, this is outside, this is inside. But if it's like, hey, I really need you to understand this is confidential information and it should not leave our building, therefore don't go use Copilot online, right? Use maybe the Copilot internally, and this is why, right? I think that some organizations have tried, without success, to block AI websites and stuff everywhere. They're just going to keep popping up. So it's a losing battle if that's your strategy, right? You just need to really focus on data management education and educating them on how AI actually works.
I know we have a couple questions up front that they've been raising their hand a little bit.
Yep. Forgive me, this is a little bit envelope stretching, but I haven't heard any discussion from y'all, or even in recent months, about BYOD, bring your own device. So the first question is, do any of you have any particular policies with respect to bring your own device, allowing an employee to use their own smartphone with the company network? And then I got another that goes beyond that. Go ahead. What do you say?
Well, I can start. We're a mix. So we do not provide company phones. We do require company laptops. And we are, BYOD has been a subject for years where we're trying to find that right balance. Because it's, how do you mix the controls? How do you control the apps that are in play? How do you get to the data? How do you control the data at the end of the day that's being used on those devices? So I think a lot of it is how intentional the organization's strategy is, and then a lot of it gets back to data governance, data management, even identity access management. Where, how do you have the right controls on the device level to be able to say you have certainty that it's being used the right way?
Yeah. Following that, and this is where it's a little bit of an envelope stretch, have any of you considered bring your own security, bring your own identity? Maybe I go to Let's Encrypt and I've got a client cert. Does that tie in, if I'm hired, to your organization to identify me?
No, we're not considering that.
And then can we bring the mic up front? Because these people up front have raised their hand quite a bit, so make sure we grab
this
everybody. Or yeah, if you want to grab ours too.
Around the discussion about AI and automation, we talked a lot about people deep in their careers and using these technologies to take things off of our plates. How do you do that but balance retaining those entry-level jobs that are going to be valuable to people who are just starting their careers?
honestly, I think that sometimes the entry-level folks get jobs that aren't that challenging. And I think that it almost motivates them less. And so I would love to give entry-level folks that seem to be more hungry, more challenging jobs out the gate. And I think right now they get some of those less meaningful tasks because somebody has to do it, right? And the more senior folks don't want to do it. And so I think leveraging automation, like, it gives them better opportunities than we probably had when we started.
Yeah, I also was going to add that when AI, I was like, what are we going to do for entry-level roles? And I started to think about that. And sometimes I think we write job descriptions for people that have 5 to 10 years of experience as entry-level. I kind of feel like we can create more entry-level jobs because they don't necessarily need to know security inside and out. If you have critical thinking, problem solving, and you can have people that are good with patterns. If you think about all the data that needs to be looked at, like, that's a different skill set than knowing what every port is, whatever that is. So I think we can teach them on-the-job training that's going to open up some additional opportunities. But like when I said before, you know, security is a journey. I think for us that have been in the workplace, I mean, cybersecurity wasn't even a thing when most of us got into, and we all fell into it. And I think we as leaders need to think, we fell into it. We didn't have experience when we first started. So I think it drives me crazy when we have entry-level jobs asking for a CISSP. Like, who's writing these job descriptions? You know what I mean? And I think we have to challenge our HR departments, and we have to challenge people to think differently about how we attract talent.
I think you bring up a great point, though, too, because folks in those entry-level roles, they may not be doing all the data munging and that stuff in the future, but they need to understand it, right, for foundational skill development and build on for that next role that they want to. So while we may replace it with AI, they do have to understand the fundamentals on that, too.
I think it's a good question, so I'll chime in. I think for me as a leader, what I'm looking for from my team is how do I shift the work? So right now, most of my entry-level jobs are looking at, like, reviewing phishing tickets or doing proxy requests or these sort of manual things, and there's a lot of humans doing that work. When I get applicants that come, or I go talk to colleges or I go talk to Ohio University, what do they want to do? Every cybersecurity what do they want to do? Pen test, red team, forensics. I don't have any. I know, Eric, it's your profession. Woot. But I think they want to come and do that, and then my entry-level job is not in forensics, which is probably more important for me because it requires more of the human brain than a proxy ticket. And so what I'm thinking about is work shifting. So how do I get entry-level jobs in forensics where the skills are and what I need, and not in phishing tickets?
Shared mailboxes.
Yeah, shared mailboxes, DLP alerts.
Thank you. Do you recommend conducting third-party assessment regarding security controls with the entities that you deal with, or do you?
Do I recommend it or do I do it?
Do you do it or recommend it?
To do third-party security reviews?
Mm-hmm. With your entities that you deal with, for instance, the state of Ohio, do you deal with the city?
Oh, sorry, I couldn't hear. No, I don't. We don't have any. I don't. At the state of Ohio, we don't have any connection to oversight with the city.
Okay,
completely
but
separate.
when they deal with you, do you recommend or do you think it's a good idea that you have compliance that they need to meet before dealing with your data or open APIs or whatever?
You mean you talking about Columbus specifically or vendors generally? In general. Yes, I mean, obviously when we contract with anybody today, we have a data security and privacy terms that vendors sign, which is essentially 10 pages of all comply with NIST. And it goes into specific attestations you must make as an entity of the security controls you have. And then we follow that up with SOC 2 reports, high trust, PCI reports, and things like that to further validate. And then we're also looking at how we can use modern tools to understand the security posture of our vendors. So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach. Does that help?
We do the same thing.
Yeah, it's ditto. It's pretty common, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We always have fun doing these, so thank you for listening. I know after lunch it's kind of hard. You want to take a nap, so appreciate everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.